Ahead. My next guest is Kurt Bardella. He has spent more than a decade representing members of Congress, including Republican Congressman Darrell Issa. Kurt, thanks so much for being with us. This is a president who ran on the platform of America First. But I want to put up a map here, and let's just take a look at all the places the U.S.'s military is now taking action just in the last couple of weeks. Syria, Afghanistan, Somalia. Do you think the president is still pursuing this America First agenda that he campaigned on?
Well, I think you look at the way in which he has engaged, in foreign policy, and really it's been a massive spectacle. Whether it was launching, 57 or 59, missiles in Syria, or the mother of all bombs the other day on ISIS. It's the spectacle of which he has gone about doing so is very consistent with what we've seen from Donald Trump, the propagandist, the showman, the producer of reality TV. And I think that he believes, at least, that by showing and flexing America muscle, American might, that's exactly the type of policy he's talked about in the past, which is America first, America being strong and forceful and decisive. Those are the things that he attacked President Obama on before, which was, in his mind, not being decisive enough. No one can say that the actions he's taken the last few days and the last week haven't been directed, straightforward, and forthright. It remains to be seen whether, really, policy by this, I kind of liken it to a Hulk Hogan foreign policy of just strength and nothing really underneath that. Whether that's going to work long term or not, we'll find out.
Kind of interesting how you put it in terms of what he has been consistent with in terms of being decisive, that type of thing. Now, there is a lot of talk still about who has the president's ear and what's happening among his advisors. One person who is apparently losing favor is his chief strategist, Steve Bannon, and someone many think the president got his sort of nationalistic ideology or rhetoric from. Explain the genesis of this relationship between Bannon and President Trump, because I know that you have some familiarity with Steve Bannon.
Sure. Well, if you follow Donald Trump's political rise and really involvement in politics, Steve has been at the forefront of that for a very long time. And even just going back to this most recent campaign, when Steve was still at Breitbart, he hosted a daily news show on Sirius XM radio. And Donald Trump was a guest on that show frequently. I mean, more than at least 25 times going back to 2015. And they would have very in-depth conversations about the direction of the country, America's role in foreign affairs. And a lot of, I think, Trump's ideology in the campaign was shaped in these conversations with Steve on this show. And so it's a really deep-rooted relationship, which is why it was funny when Trump tried to create distance from Steve Bannon this last week, saying, essentially saying he barely knows the guy, which just isn't true based on the fact that he was on this public radio show numerous times for over the last 2 years.
Right. So what changed?
Well, I think what changed was they weren't winning. They weren't doing well. Trump's been inundated with negative headlines and self-inflicted wounds, whether it's Sean Spicer, Steve Bannon. I also think that, and I've talked about this a little bit before, Steve was someone who started stealing some of Trump's thunder. When you get on the cover of Time magazine, and particularly that publication, which Trump has often talked about being on the cover so many times, and he boasts about that a lot. He keeps in his offices all these stacks of magazines of things that he's been on the cover of. When your own aide is starting to do those things, you're flying too close to the sun, and you're not really, in Trump's mind, you're not knowing your role. Your job is to support me, not be out front of me, and not become the co-president, and playing to that caricature that somehow he was really running the show, not Trump. That's not going to fly with someone like Donald Trump.
Now, is that Steve Bannon's fault, though, or is he just kind of getting the short end of the stick?
Well, I think that Steve was a very willing participant in the creation of the caricature that he was really running the show. And he didn't do anything to dissuade anybody from believing that notion that Steve was really in charge. I think at the time, Steve really believed that it was to his benefit, that people thought he had all this power and influence over President Trump. And unfortunately for Steve, as time went on and failure began to really overrun the agenda, whether it was not successfully repealing and replacing Obamacare, whether it was the cancellation of the executive orders on who was going to come into this country, those type of failures, really started creating a situation where Trump was looking for somebody to blame, and Steve was front and center for that.
We have to go in just a moment, but I do want to ask you, what benefit is it to Steve to stay in his current position if President Trump has come out in such a public way and sort of talked down about him?
Well, Steve is someone who's very, I think, combative by nature, and not someone who accepts failure very easily. And so you can make the case that by staying and surviving this and eventually moving on your own terms when you're not under siege, that you can come out on the other side of that looking stronger than if you were to leave right now. I do think that there's some wisdom in the idea that maybe he should just walk away right now. If you're going to be sidelined and everyone knows so publicly there's this distance between you and the president, it's not doing you any good just to be there as a placeholder. You're probably better served moving on with your life and reinventing yourself.
Kurt Bardella, thanks for your time tonight.
Thanks for having me,
appreciate
Anna.
it.